Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. Okay, so who remembers these? Yep, plastic drinking straws. More to the point, who remembers making great Waggler floats out of them? And if you're under 40, you're probably unlikely to remember them at all. If you're much over 40 like me, you're probably going to remember very well making some really good wagglers out of these plastic floats, plastic straws rather. The only problem is, nowadays, you can't seem to buy them in the shops. What you get now is these. They're dirt cheap, there's over 100 in there, but they're made out of paper. So, first I thought, well, I can't make floats out of that. But I've done some tests. First of all, I threw one of these into a bowl of water for a few hours to see if it would just literally unravel like tissue paper, and it didn't. So that was the good first point. I think it's actually probably got some sort of like waxy type coating on the back of it, but either way, it didn't literally just fall apart. So that prompted me to have a look a bit further. Also, wall strength. If I squeeze it, I can compress it, but that literally took a bit of doing. And then, if I squeeze back again, it goes back to almost where it was. So that was actually another plus point for it. And I thought, well look, I'm going to give this a go. I don't know how it's going to turn out. You're starting this at the same time I am. And I honestly think they're probably going to work out fine, but we're going to find out now. So the first thing I needed to do was to work out what I wanted by way of a range of floats. And I decided that if I can get from 4 AAAs, or 4 AAs as we call it, down to about 3 BBs in 1 BB increments, that'll give me a good range of floats to pretty much cope with most conditions I'm going to come across in my day-to-day travels. Problem is, how long's a piece of float? No, not a piece of string, a piece of float. Because I could have just shoved a bung in the bottom of there and hoped that that was it and then sort of guessed. But what I did, I actually did shove a bung in the bottom of there and I put it into the old float tube here, and as a rough guesstimate, 4 AAs is probably going to come out at something like 16 centimetres, 160 millimetres. And then by taking small amounts of shot off, a BB at a time, it looks like if I go 10 millimetres down for each descending size of float, then I'll have exactly what I want. It's not going to be accurate and I may need to make some adjustments. But basically, that's where we're going. It's a range of 7 floats. And what I'll do now is I'll show you exactly how I'm going to go about this. First of all then, I'm going to measure the straw, the first straw, at 16 centimetres or 160 millimetres. Which is sort of there. And then to cut it, I have had a bit of practice at this just to see. I've tried hacksaws and all the rest of it, and I found that just a sharp craft knife is the best. I've also got myself this piece of wood, not to rest on because I'm not going to damage the surface, just really as a marker so I get the cut straight. So if I line up my mark on there and then just using a sawing motion till it goes through, maybe a bit longer. I'll cut the first part of it, look, and then just work your way down. You want a nice straight edge, obviously. And that's the first one done. And here's the finished articles. I've got 7 in the range from 160, 150, 40, 30, 20, 10 and exactly 100 millimetres or 10 centimetres. And that should, hopefully, equate to somewhere about 4 AA down to about 3 BB, I hope. Now I've got to make a bung for the bottom. It's actually fairly easy to do. I've just got myself some of these cheapest chips barbecue skewers. I got a piece of printer paper. This is 80-gram paper, just the normal stuff you buy in the shops. And I've cut it off at 20 millimetres wide by 120 millimetres, 12 centimetres long. And the reason I've done that is because I'm going to glue it around that stick like that. And then if I got it right, let's grab one of these. Obviously this is one I prepared earlier in good Blue Peter fashion. Put that in and needs quite a tight fit. Probably that, maybe a little bit slightly less tight than that, but there we go. So there's your basic bung, and on this one, as you can see, I've just chopped off the end. So we've got the peg for the Waggler float. To create the bungs, I'm just going to take the strip, and then I'm going to get some super glue, just normal super glue, and I'm just going to lay a very thin line of it along the very top edge there. And then I'm going to take my skewer, I think they're skewers, barbecue sticks, and just lay it on. I'm trying to get them completely at 90 degrees to it. So you end up with that. Now I've actually already made enough of these things up, so you get the idea. I would have waited for this to dry, but this is already one that's been done. So we'll carry on from there. Once it's glued, you may find just along here there's a bit of a ridge because you didn't necessarily get it on quite right. Make sure you get rid of that. Just literally shave it off like that. Make sure you've got everything, because what you don't want is a lip coming out, because what we're going to do now is we're going to literally just twist that and glue it in place. Nope, not having lunch. What I'm going to do is get some wood glue. This is exterior wood glue, but PVA wood glue probably doesn't make any difference whether it's interior or exterior. I'll pour some on here. It's a little bit thick like that, so what I'm going to do is just get a little bit of water, just a small amount, pour it in. Then I'm going to just stir that around, but I've forgotten to get a stick for it, but bear with me. Can't be perfect all the time, can you? Okay, quick stir. More or less got what I need. Then it's just a question, getting your stick, putting it in, draw that along. This could get a bit messy, so my suggestion would be have one of these handy. And then holding the end and pulling, but not too tight, because it will break. It's only paper, remember. Just try and get this on in a nice smooth motion. Doesn't take long, as you can see. And hence the need for the cloth, or the tissue rather. Make sure you haven't got any drips. And that's pretty much it. It's just a question of waiting for it to dry. To save time, I did these ones last night, and so they've dried overnight. Now it's just a question of making sure they fit neatly into the holes. This one, when I just tested it, is a bit tight. So what I'm going to do is use the knife and just scrape off a little bit like that. You could just as easily use sandpaper, I'm sure. In fact, I will do that now just to finish off because it's got some loose bits sticking up. When I tried it last night, it was still a bit wet, so that worked rather well, but on reflection, this isn't necessarily the way to go. But we live and learn, don't we? We live and learn. Right, see how that fits now. Oh yeah, that's a much better fit. Make sure that you don't squeeze too hard and you don't crush these things when you're doing it. So I'm using a spare one, just in case. There we go. Okay, so we've got 7 of them there. And obviously what I need to do now is just to use that glue I just made up to glue them into the holes here. And then just cut off the ends. And this is where this does come in handy, because give yourself about sort of 15 mil or so. If you go round it like that, you'll find that it snaps off quite neatly. Bit of sanding on the end there in a minute, and we're ready to go. And if you want to keep these things really, really simple, you could just almost stop there. You've got the bottom peg in, but if you replicate another peg, but for the antenna, I've made that sort of, I don't know, 60, 70 millimeters long, just what I felt like. You can glue that into there like that. You've now got all but a finished float. But we never do things simply around here, do we? So what we're going to do is we're going to make them with interchangeable tips. If you watch any of my other videos, you'll know that virtually all of my floats have got interchangeable tips, and they just literally pull out and reinsert. Not quite like that. Let me show you. These are the Wagglers I made probably, I don't know, probably about 4, even possibly 5 years ago when I first started this channel. If I just grab one for a second. This is the 4AA reed waggler made from that sort of like Norfolk reed stuff. And I've got a little hole in there, so if I grab one of my inserts, by the way, I've got all kinds of inserts, look, and they're all interchangeable, and I make multiples of them just in case I lose one. But basically, all that happens is that goes in there, just like the Drennan crystals, and you've got a float with a reasonable size antenna. If I wanted to, I can make it shorter, or this is a bit of an extreme example. I could also have a really long antenna, and of course I can change, excuse me, I can change all the tip colours. So that's what we're going for. We're really going to try for it. In order to make this part, you need to get your hands on some of these. These are pastel gel pens. Obviously, you may well be in a different country to me, but if you get the pastel gel pens, you can probably get them from a reject shop or pound shop or whatever. I got mine from a place called Kmart, and the reason you do it is because the inside of these is wider than the standard blue ballpoint pens. Just take it apart, do that, pull this off here. I'm not going to do it just for now because I've got one I've already done it to. And once you've run this under the tap with that nib off, of course, it will just be empty like that. And that's why I say don't use these, because these seem to be an oil-based ink and it just doesn't come out. And not only that, the internal tube of those ones is thinner than the internal tube of these ones. So just hope you can get hold of these. If not, you'll just have to go back to the standard way of doing it, like I just explained. Once you've got the tubes out, you need to make sure you've cleaned off that waxy feel from the outside of it. Otherwise, paint and glue doesn't stick. So just get some, excuse my fingers, reasonably coarse sandpaper and just rub up and down it until all of the coating is off. I've actually already done this one, but just to show you. Okay, what we're going to do now is cut them into 20mm sections. This one's quite straightforward. Once you've marked them up, it's just a question of using your block. Just roll and push down at the same time. And there we go, that's it done. To make the tubes waterproof, what you've got to do is insert a little bit of a bung in the end, like that. But obviously that's not good enough as it stands. It has to be glued in. But remember what I said about the waxy coating on the outside? Well, there's kind of one of those on the inside as well. So I just got a safety pin and I've just bent over the end there by about 3mm. If I turn around, show you what I'm going to do. If I put that in and then twist and pull out at the same time. It's kind of difficult to do while I'm showing you, but we'll give it a go. There we are. And what that does, it gives you something for the glue to key onto. I've mixed up some 5-minute epoxy, so I'm just going to dip the end in and insert into that end where you just scored. Again, a little bit of cloth or tissue, I must get that word right, and just go in, say, 3 or 4mm into it. And what we're going to be doing, once we've done this, and once it's dried, is we're going to just chop the ends off, and then that's literally just a bung. the glue's dried, so I've just chopped the stick off the end there, more or less flush with the end. That's the bung in place, and now what we've got to do is find a way to get this to go into here with a snug fit. At the moment you may be able to see that it's a bit of a wobbly fit. So a bit of research and development, and I've decided that a 70mm piece of this same 20mm wide paper is what's going to do the job. And the way I'm going to do it is fairly straightforward. Oops. Grab one of your sticks, push it in that end. Now, taking the super glue and being very careful, you might want to wear rubber gloves here because you can get this on your fingers and you really wouldn't want to do that. So safety first always. I'm only going to need one and I'll show you why now. Take the glue and we're just going to run a bead, a very small bead across the top edge like we did before with the bottom bung. Give that a second or so. And what you find is that this usually ends up sticking to the paper, so if you give it that second or so, it will actually stop it from doing that because it's not quite dry and you can just move it. Then this is going to stick on there in exactly the same way. Hold it down for a second or two. And again, it might just stick, so just be careful. There we go, sticking a little bit of stick. There we are, that's it done. And as before, just smooth that around like that. If you get this at the right point, it doesn't stick to you, but it does just finish off that edge. Now, we're going to run 3 beads of glue. I need to stand up so I can see what I'm doing here. One along the top edge, one down the middle, not too large a bead, like that. And again, being careful, 3 beads of glue, and this is where you need the glove. I'm going to now just roll this down, keeping pressure all the time. There we go. Just pause at the end for a second or so. Only a second or so. And you may find there's a little bit sticking up. I don't know if you can see that, but there's just a little bit on the edge there that's sticking up. And gently but firmly, because it's already mostly dry, that's it, sorted. So as you see, little tiny bit of residue on there, but safety first always. Make sure you do that. Before you try and fit these together, make sure you've got a nice sliding fit with them into the floats. And obviously all you need to do there is just take your piece of sandpaper, give them a little bit of light sanding, and away you go. So now I'm going to use the epoxy adhesive again, because that gives me more setup time. Don't need to go too mad on the amount you're putting on. Bit on the lower half, and so you can see, in it goes. Oops, don't drip it down. There we are. And just wipe off any excess. Just make sure it's properly home, so it's flush like that. Just be a bit careful that you don't get any on the stick, or if you do, make sure you give it a good wipe up. You don't want your stick sticking in, do you? I've left the stick sticking in there because it was a way to push it in. I'll allow this to dry and then we can withdraw the stick as necessary. But we're almost ready for paint once these are dry. Now I have actually done some tests and I sprayed that on because I thought it might sort of come off, but as you can see from the destruction here, it seems to be fine. I then tried some ordinary exterior paint, whoops, which I did again earlier, and that seems to be fine too. And then I did this one, which again is the exterior paint, but this time I actually gave it a light sand, and to be honest, I don't see that it makes any difference. So I'm not going to bother to sand mine. If you're not sure, sand yours, but very lightly, and then we can take it from there. So the next thing is I'm going to get on with the painting. Morning. Right, well, overnight I've put 2 coats of paint on my floats, and I actually got lazy. I had some of this Dulux Duramax paint, and it's a spray paint, and it just made it easier to do. So I've put 2 coats of spray paint on these, and as you can see, I left the sticks in just so I could stick them into this little piece of wood, just a scrap piece of wood with some holes in it, and it just stands them all upright like that. Makes it easier for you. Right, if you don't want to use spray paint, or if you haven't got spray paint, you could just use an ordinary exterior paint. Now this is the one I used to paint my seat box, which I made a few weeks ago, and as you saw from yesterday's results, seems to stick really well. So I don't see any reason why you couldn't use a good grade exterior paint that you happen to have lying around. Cuts down on cost. So at this point, all we need to do is to take out the sticks. Now, remember, this is the reinforced area here and here. Don't squeeze in the middle, squeeze at the reinforced areas. Pull the sticks out. Now we've done that, we can think about putting in the inserts. Now the inserts are literally just pieces of that 2.5mm cane, or if you can get slightly thinner, that's even better, so that we're going to actually fit them into there like that. It's really that simple. Now you may find that this actually was quite a good sliding fit to start with. Some of them are a bit tighter, so you may just have to get your piece of sandpaper and just sand down the bottom a bit. And what you're looking for is just a reasonably loose fit, because remember, when you put these in, they're going to have paint on them. Probably a couple of coats at least, and maybe a coat of varnish, so you may find that you have to mess about a little bit. Have a bit of practice first of all, put one in, try a coat of paint and see what happens. Luckily, I don't have to worry about that because I've made all these. So what we're going to do now is put that in, and we're going to do the same for all of them. We're going to chuck it in the tank and see if these things do measure up to the, was it 4 AAs down to 1.5 BB, something like that? Well, anyway, we're going to find that out now. Well, moment of truth. I've put a Waggler adapter on and I've got 3 AA shots on it. I know this one's supposed to be 4, but this is quite a long tube. And if I'm wrong and it sinks, well, I've got to fish it out then. So we're going to go with 3 AAs to start with. And I don't think it's going to be a 4 AA. Still, wasn't a bad guess. You probably can't see that, but I've probably got 15mm of the body left to go. So I'm going to try a BB, which would make it 3.5 AAs. And if you're not sure how shotting works, I've done a video on shotting. I'll put a link up above now for you. Right, so this is 3.5 AAs. Whew. Let's see if we can just get you to see that. That is pretty damn good. All right, it's not 4, I blew it. So what we'd have to do is to make the first one 170mm body to make that 4 AAs. But hey, it wasn't far off, was it? Not bad for a guess. I'm going to go down by 1, so this should be 3 AA. 3 AA? Fingers crossed. Yeah, it's not far off. I'll just do the tests on the rest of them and then we'll mark them up so I know which ones they are. Well, I've done the tests in the tank and I was slightly out. As you saw, this first one wasn't 4 AAs, it was 3.5, which is near enough for a homemade float for me. If I want a 4 AA one, I'll make a slightly taller one. I also found that by only going down in 10mm steps, that probably wasn't enough. It does make a difference, but you'd probably want to go down in 15mm steps from 160, 145, 130 and so on. That would probably give you a bit more of an accurate thing. But as I said, I was working from no knowledge whatsoever to start with, and these have worked out pretty well. You still now have to make these tips, as I said before. By all means, go ahead and use either spray paint or indeed the exterior paint that I was talking about. But these sort of fluorescent or bright colours, you tend to go into craft shops, that kind of thing, and you can see these really bright orange and bright yellows in there in acrylic paint. So just get yourself a couple of little tubs or sachets of those, and you'll have enough of that to last you pretty much forever. Whatever the design on the top is, that's up to you. But hey, that's it, we're done. All finished. So, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, click the like button. If you want to subscribe, feel free to do that too. And if you want to donate, that's always very much appreciated as well. Thanks again. See you next time.